everyone. Hope you're all fed and watered now. Thanks everyone for coming along and taking part in the workshop today. My name is Fraser Mole. I'm a consultant, sustainability consultant with Spring Environmental. You heard from Trish last year, so it's time to change up the voice, change up the accent. So I'll be doing the first half today, but I'm joined by Trish Springett, who'll be taking you through the more technical background of today. So over the next hour, we're going to walk you through the famed carbon calculator, a tool we developed specifically for the UK archaeology sector. We'll cover how it can be used for kind of detail, project level carbon accounting with PAS 2080 in mind, but also how it can be used more generally for your organisational carbon footprint. Depending kind of on your needs, size, resources, availability, that sort of thing. So I'll reintroduce us from last year for those of you who aren't aware who we are. We'll talk through the calculator and how we use the tool for organisational footprinting, and then the project carbon accounting, well, again, as 2018 in mind. So at Spring Environmental, we are a specialist sustainability consultancy. We help our clients navigate the challenges of sustainability from kind of high level strategy and implementation. So you're looking at net zero and the big picture, but we also focus on the ground implementation. For us, it's not just about making plans, it's about how do we achieve them. So we've got some extensive experience working with some of the UK's largest infrastructure projects, and we're also this dedicated sustainability lead for a couple of organisations in the room today, certainly doing a significant amount of work with Oxford, Cotswold and York Archaeology. So our work covers the full life cycle of a project, from the initial concept stages where we conduct carbon footprints, feasibility studies, and supporting the design and consent process with environmental impact assessments, planning support. We then also, not just to build and plan, but we help clients actively manage their environmental responsibilities during the operational phase. So whether that's through 14001, carbon reduction planning, that sort of thing. Again, the big driving industry toward net zero. It's just one of many kind of things we're looking at in the industry, but certainly we're well positioned to go from the start to finish on those. The other big thing we do is sustainability as a service. It's an ongoing service essentially where we act as an outsourced sustainability manager, perfect for companies that maybe don't have the size and the resources to have a full-time in-house one. They're getting harder and more expensive to find. And essentially, we bring our expertise gained from throughout this industry and all the other industries that we work in, and work as a kind of seamless extension of your team, managing carbon footprints, client requirements, net zero planning, that sort of thing. So again, yeah, you get the benefits of an experienced in-house sustainability manager without the ongoing and the cost and the ongoing kind of resource requirement there. Our team, just a portion of the team that you're most likely to see, kind of in this sector. We've got Trish, director, who's here with me today. I'm second from the list in a nice COVID area headshot there. Again, we've got kind of certified life cycle carbon footprint experts, sustainability strategists, and specialists in environmental permitting, like our other Chris Atkins. Got dedicated project management consultancy, like Philippa, just to make sure we have a good client can focus. And a project management is kind of delivering what we need. So enough about us. We'll get into the FAME calculator now. Kind of a little bit of a recap if you were here last year with some developments. It was still in development this time last year. Um, the first one is why we'll have graphics about how doom and gloom the world's going. But the global greenhouse gas emissions warning scenarios, we'll see various pathways based on implementing no climate policies, a kind of current path, which is the orange line, some high scale pledges and targets, and then the 2 degree and 1.5 degree pathways, which is what net zero covers, is essentially the science based targets and 1.5 degree pathway. So it's all well and good thinking, right? We're talking about adding 1 or 2 degrees, warmth to the environment. What does that actually mean for us? And it's not always tangible, especially in the UK. But certainly within the archaeological sector in the UK, we've seen kind of direct threats to the record from coastal erosion, loss of organic remains in wetlands. There is a real threat to the archaeological record in the UK. Kind of arguably more in your face at the moment. You just get operational issues as well that we face. Increased demand for kind of rescue work, health and safety challenges from kind of extreme weather, a lot of the work's outdoors, a lot of the things where your net zero planning has to solve, which is the fact that a lot of the work could be trying to involve jumping in a vehicle and driving to very remote parts of the UK. There's challenges around availability of vehicles, implementation of EVs, and are they capable of doing the job that you need them. So it's not about some far-flung issue that means we get nicer summers here. There's a genuine kind of threat in the UK as well, even if it's not quite as severe in some other parts of the world. So the tool, the reason we created it, it's essentially client demands. I suppose within recognising enough of the organisations here, if we do a show of hands, who's been asked for a carbon footprint by a client sometime in their career, it's probably going to be all or most of us. Yeah, somewhere in a tender, somewhere is have you done a carbon footprint? Have you got a carbon reduction plan? How are you getting out ahead of it? A lot of this is it's rolling downhill a little bit, where your kind of major players are under direct pressure from their stakeholders to decarbonise. And when they sum it all up, they realise it's our supply chain is the real problem here. Let's push on to them and down. And as part of the supply chain for national highways, other major infrastructure groups, that's kind of where the pressure coming from. So again, the tool was primarily created to provide a consistent, credible way for all archaeological units, all companies, and the kind of same umbrella to report emissions, so that we're comparing like for like to agree protocols. But then also, you may not feel it in your first go round, but to reduce as much complexity out of the whole process as possible. You're welcome to, in your weekend reading list, read the Greenhouse Gas Protocol and some other nice beefy documents. They're not, they're not for the weekend. So yeah, broadly, we're trying to meet growing stakeholder demands for project-based carbon reporting, especially, where clients will want to know not what's your carbon footprint, but what's the carbon footprint of the thing you delivered for me and me only, because that's that I care about. Tool also provides credible data. We can throw numbers at them. We can guess how much kind of fuel we used on a project, or we can do it in a methodological, consistent way. That means we have some, we can stand behind those numbers. And probably more crucially, is make better decisions off of those. Ensure the data is reported accurately and consistently across between the full industry. And again, managing kind of future risks from evolving environmental legislation, client expectations, it's only increasing the amount that you're having to report from a legislative point of view, from a client point of view, it's only increasing. So the sooner you get on board and have the tools to do that, the easier life is in the long run, even if it feels slightly painful at times just now getting to grips with it. Just as a recap, we've got three major scopes of emissions. Scope 1 is from what you burn yourself. So fuel out the back of a pickup truck, gas in a boiler to heat your office, that sort of thing. Emissions from your refrigerant units if you've got lovely air conditioning. Or, as you've seen in York, industrial freeze drying equipment as well. Scope 2 is generally just electricity you buy, any purchased energy, steam, electricity, that sort of thing. For most people, just electricity. And scope 3 is basically everything else, and it's really the toughest to get to grips with. It's the toughest to solve, but it's always the biggest, especially for a kind of service industry. It's always the largest. So again, that's covering everything from hire plant, staff commuting, to the goods and services that you buy. They all have a direct or indirect impact on the environment, and they only happen because you procure those services or because your guys are commuting to a place of work, they're working from home. All these things run under the umbrella of your own business. Here, don't worry too much about reading every single box of the chart. I just want you to know that essentially, as part of the FAME tool development, we have scoped out the boundary of what we will report against. So we're not doing everything. We've essentially identified what is material and immaterial for your footprints. Again, this is part of the consistent reporting. And again, we've done that across kind of each stage of the project. And again, that's part of just making sure that the burden isn't against things that aren't a meaningful impact in the industry and we're never going to change or solve or that we care about. And we can really put those resources and that energy into things that have a tangible impact. The tool, essentially, we look at it on a project by project basis. And the tool, you can use it for a couple of different things. But the more you use a tool, the more projects that you kind of implement into it in terms of your kind of forecast and your actual emissions. Every project that you put into it, essentially, the more projects you put in the tool, the closer to your organizational footprint you get. So you may choose to use it for just selected clients, that have a need to know that information. You could also embed it within your organization and then have a clearer picture on your actual, both at a granular level and your full organizational kind of carbon impact, which again, you're asked for at that kind of level, probably more frequently. So yeah, see projects as kind of building block as to your full organizational carbon footprint. The other way to do it, appreciate larger organizations are going to have lots of large-scale projects which require that level of management. If you're a smaller organization, or potentially don't have quite the same requirements, you can essentially use the tool to just calculate your full organizational footprint. We'll explain the method in detail in a second. So you're either piecing it together from the bottom up, where you're inputting kind of every single project unit your unit undertakes over the year. The tool then adds them all up and gives you, again, that granular view on a project by project basis, but then something you can say, this is our organizational carbon footprint. And then, again, that's quite resource heavy. So the tool has been built to enable you to essentially do a single project, input the data as a single project, where you would, that project would like be your 2025 carbon footprint. You put the full year data in, and out at the other end will pop your carbon footprint from an organisational point of view for the entire team. And again, that's potentially an advantage if you're new to the game. You just want to see what the numbers are. And certainly, it's been done. The factors that we've used in there are specific to the archaeological industry, so significantly more accurate than the kind of generic factors that you would get at kind of other online tools. So again, your two kind of approaches, detailed all projects, you've input every project your unit undertakes over the year as a separate entity. The tool then aggregates that. Alternatively, just create a single project and put in the total annual data, and just be careful not to do both, because if you do both, you're counting every project and your annual, and you're double counting, and you're giving yourself a little bit more work than you need to. But just to highlight, the tool's more than just this niche past 2080 satisfaction tool. It's a genuine kind of it's just one piece of past 2080, but there's multiple uses for it. So the FAME tool, to kind of give you the concept and how data is input. You essentially, in the kind of yellow sections, input your group level data. So your fixed office locations, projects you want to report on, and any custom carbon factors where the database of factors, there's something kind of, you've got better activity data, you've got an improved factor. We do enable that as kind of data availability improves with time. Again, looking at it on a project basis, you are inputting the total organisation project days. We are setting a forecast at the start of the project, covering your bill of quantities, transport data, soil and activation, and your overheads, like your electricity, things like that, for office spaces. You've then got various data checks to make sure that's complete, and then click go. It's all kind of macro driven, and out the other end pops the GSV file with your project level or group level carbon footprint, depending how you're doing it. So what we've kind of opted to do is give you a little interactive workshop, all right, nothing too heavy, where we will kind of show you the tool and how it looks. Now, we've thought a few different approaches of how to do this. The tool is very macro kind of driven, and the idea of unleashing a full room of people into quite a sensitive tool all at the same time felt like a bad idea. So what we've enabled, by scanning the QR code or following the link, you can basically go to a non-functional but a view-only version of the tool. So you can take that link down if you've not got access to a laptop just now, and at any point go in and flick through it and see the different stages of it. Doesn't look the best on the phone. It is meant for a nice desktop setup, but certainly the functionality is there. You can have a little look. What I'll be doing is running through it on the big screen for anybody who doesn't have a phone, but just to let you see it. So we're going to do a little game. We didn't really set up, but we're going to say arrange yourself into discussion groups, essentially at the table you're at. I'll bring up the FAME tool, and we'll just go through it one at a time and say, right, where do we think we put the fuel? Where do we think we put the electricity supply? Where do we think we put the various categories? and just again give you a little bit of feel of that. Um, the workshop task list and the tool up at the same time. So I'll try and keep you right. Especially if there's anybody who's looking at it on their phone just now. First thing we're looking for, we want to look at the first data point, which is where do you think we'll be sticking 7,000 litres of diesel? So our fuel card data for the year says we'll use 7,000 litres of diesel this year. Maybe a little small up on screen, but if anybody can suggest which tab they might look to on this. So you've got the bill of quantities, project transport, liquid fuels, soil excavation, or overheads. I'll give you the first one for free. We're looking at liquid fuels. Yeah. So, liquid fuel tab. We look for the project codes. Fame workshop. So I've pre-entered a project. And we could put that in as a record that we, so you can either project it as part of a project or part of the year, or in retrospect go back and say, here's how much we actually used. So if we're doing the full year, 1st of January 25, and there we go. So that's the date. We've got three options. If we have the litres of fuel available, we can use option A. If we don't know how many litres we use because we don't have fuel cards, but say we've got vehicles where we keep the mileage from the odometer readings, we can use option B. So that where we know at a granular level to say this van travelled this many miles, this passenger vehicle travelled this many miles. Alternatively, if we just have a grand mileage and we're not really sure what vehicle used what, we have a less accurate way of doing it. So if you think of moving down the flow chart, your kind of level of detail is reducing, your accuracy is reducing. So if you are at the point where we only really know how many miles everything our vehicle travelled, because we have our service reports, then that's fine. This gives you the idea of, right, what would be next and there's a reason for doing it. So here we have the litres of fuel available. So we're looking at 7,000 litres. So drop down menus as far as possible. Company vehicles, that was in our own vehicles. Fuel, we've got diesel, litres, and we have 7,000. We hit add. It runs. Now, if anybody's got it in the QR codes, that's the bit you won't be able to do. You can play around with putting data in, but probably the macros aren't going to run anything for you. So that's as simple as that. We have a little record of everything that's been put in. At the back. Just for info. And what you can do as well, if you made an error with that, you can recall that record, amend it, and essentially this record will update to reflect that Fraser put in 7,000 litres of diesel. That was wrong. We actually meant 8,000, but you're not obscuring that fact. You're saying, we've drawn a line through this entry, and this is a lie kind of thing. So there's traceability again, which adds to your credibility in reporting. Again, off the back of the tool, we've entered the data now in the correct location. And on the dashboard, I'll zoom out first, give you the big picture, but you won't be reading anything off of that. You've essentially got your overall carbon footprint in the top left quadrant, project-based footprint in the top right quadrant. You can do it by client in the bottom left, and you can also do it based on geographic location in the bottom right as well. So you can slice up that data however you like. By me adding in that we've used some transport fuel, we've got 17.59 tons of CO2 equivalent calculated out for this year. So it's comparing this year, last year, and you get that in a graphical format as well, broken down by each kind of contribution to your overall footprint. What we've also got is, again, as I mentioned, on a project basis. So if you are doing project level approach, then you can slice that to see the impact of each individual project from an ongoing management point of view, but also to enable you to have the communication tools for your client. As Chris rightly pointed out, it simplifies it in some respect that you've been asked for one number, which is litres of diesel, which everybody in the room comprehends and understands. The tool's doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the calculation, but it does need a bit of knowledge and interpretation to do that. I'm not going to go through every single other element that we were looking to kind of see where it goes. I think the point's been explained, but just to kind of run you through, the other one we're looking to do was, £10,000 for a geophysical survey. This is from the bill of quantities of various different categories, fairly comprehensive. You find the category that best represents your category of spend, bang in the number, and again, hit run, and it will add that to it. We have section for overheads, things like electricity, stationary combustion. Some of those you've already got the data for the CO2 emissions from that. Alternatively, you can put in your energy consumption, and the tool will calculate that for you. So again, it's kind of comprehensive against all your stages of project. Boundaries, we have a methodology document that kind of goes along with it to explain it in greater detail. But yeah, essentially the tool, it's just part of the puzzle, but certainly it does a lot of the heavy lifting, where we're taking measurements and metrics that are kind of common in the industry, to then generate a credible, accurate kind of carbon footprint out of our products.
Elements of the carbon footprint are dominate. So that's purchase goods and services, which predominantly has been plant and excavation, things that burn a lot of diesel as a general rule. The kind of transport element, so getting people to and from site, and then weirdly commuting also ends up being quite a high part of the carbon footprint, and that's predominantly built. There's about a quarter of the organisation's carbon footprint, and that comes from the fact that people are having to commute into the office to pick up the sort of vehicle that can go off road to then go on to off to the fieldwork side. So what the issue with that is that if we were to cut out things like commuting, we would be significantly underestimating the true carbon impact of delivering any particular archaeological project. And this is known in kind of like life cycle assessment terms as kind of cutoff. And in almost every kind of environmental assessment and carbon footprint you do, there will be some element of cutoff. We can't really avoid it. But the flip side is that we obviously need to be, according to kind of the principle of the carbon footprint, trying to avoid doing that to the material parts of your carbon footprint. So commuting, for example, is a really big one. If that's 25% of your organizational carbon footprint and we just pretend it doesn't exist in the calculator, then that's not really a great representation. But that then creates a bit of a methodological kind of difficulty for, say, reporting against CAV 2080, because we don't report the commuting carbon footprint by project. We don't record people coming to and from the office and saying, which project are you working on today? And then keeping a record of that and so on and so forth. So what we had to do within this tool is kind of go, right, how do we kind of apportion some of these kind of things that we tend to calculate annually, like the commuting, like the office carbon footprint in terms of electricity and gas consumption and things like that, onto these projects. So we had to find a methodology, a way of doing that, so that if you think about the tool, really it looks quite complicated, but underneath what it is relatively simple. It's basically saying, what's my direct carbon impact of delivering this project? So that's the transport to and from site, that's the use of plant and equipment on that project, welfare unit, so on and so forth, plus a share of what we call overheads. So that's your commuting carbon footprint, that's operating your offices, that's all of those. And then the question is, okay, so if we want to allocate a share of those overheads onto a project, what's the most sensible way of doing this? And the most sensible way of doing that, from discussion and aligning with the way that most people record their data on projects, is by looking at, well, how many kind of person days are we spending on that project relative to the overall person day capacity that we have as an organization. So underneath, that's all the tool is doing. It's basically saying, what have you used kind of directly for this project, and then saying what, if that project, if like, is in any particular month, is takes a quarter of your organizational capacity, then we'll put a quarter of that month's worth of overheads onto that project. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of kind of like, as I say, it can look quite complicated, and why am I inputting person days into it and all that kind of stuff. And it's purely for that reason. And it's because of the fact that these overheads are such a significant part of your carbon footprint that if we were to exclude them from any project, we would be significantly underestimating the true impact of that project. Now, where we are with the tool, I believe, is actually we're a step ahead of where a lot of the industry, and kind of particularly what I've seen from highways, because highways are essentially stuck in that kind of just looking at what are the direct impacts of that project. They're not thinking about what's all of that other stuff that needs to happen to make sure that this project can actually be delivered. Because without an office, without people getting to and from, to the office to get to site, none of that actually happens. So I would just want to kind of cover that bit off, because I think it's quite useful context to then understand why those tabs exist in the way that they exist. The separate bit about the way that the tool is structured, which is, again, as Fraser's rightly pointed out, this is all in the methodology, is that at different points of the project lifetime, we will have different forms of data at different levels of accuracy. So when we're at the tender stage, for example, we may only know or have estimated how in pounds units, how much kind of like we're likely to spend on any particular item, whether that be kind of, as I say, excavation, any kind of welfare unit. We may have only really estimated them in that kind of like that level of cost, sort of detail. But then as we get further down that project journey, we actually start being kind of like in a zone where we may be more able to use physical kind of units. So that's the liters and sort of element. And so our carbon footprint, actually, as time goes on, should also get more accuracy. So at the beginning, if we're using just purely kind of like cost-based metrics, the actual true value of our carbon footprint might be plus or minus this. But as we start using the sort of physical metric, like numbers of miles traveled, liters of diesel consumed, so on, the uncertainty barrier sort of starts dropping. And that kind of becomes then very important, because if you're trying to do carbon reduction activities, you want to know whether they actually work, not whether, if you like, we were so uncertain about kind of our true level of carbon footprint that we don't know whether that's a reduction of, if you like, an improvement in accuracy over a physical improvement because of our delivery and margin. So, like, the tool might sort of has these ways, if you like, and those ABC, that green, orange, red kind of flows in there. to try and kind of encourage you to sort of move up the level, particularly as the project develops in time, so that your carbon footprinting becomes more accurate. And for those of you who haven't spent too much time in PAS 2080, which I would advise, by the way, it's not that much fun. It does argue within PAS 2080 that you must do your carbon footprint at a suitable level of accuracy, which is way open for interpretation. But what I think it's trying to argue is that actually the accuracy of our carbon footprint will develop the further we get to the actual delivery and during the delivery of any particular project. So we've been kind of mindful and cognizant of that when we built this tool to try and help you, even though it might feel like a lot when you first look at it. So that's my off-piece bit done. So I just wanted to kind of, hopefully that's helpful context that when you come and get more familiar with the tool, that there's quite a lot of thinking that's gone on in the background as to how does this help us get from, say, a tender stage process when we don't know how many liters we're going to use. We don't know that now, but you might have a reserve in terms of how much you think you're going to spend on certain items, all the way through to the sort of endpoint, if you like, when you're doing the final thing. Now, the other side of PAS 2080, just briefly, and Fraser kind of showed you with the forecast and actual, is that you are obligated in PAS 2080 to be able to kind of essentially demonstrate improvement through the lifetime of the project, which is both irritating in that it kind of requires double entry because you end up having to have a forecast carbon footprint, which kind of is like, if we just carried on and delivered this project as business as usual, this is what we think the outcome would have been. And then we end up in the kind of like the actual record, which is kind of truly what happened on this project, if that makes sense. So the tool is being delivered and designed very much around kind of dealing with all of these kind of competing issues, if you like, and to enable PAS 2080 compliance, while at the same time enabling people who are sort of maybe PAS 2080 isn't a big part of their lives, to be able to kind of just simply record a carbon footprint for the organization. And that is very simple. You can just put your annual data into that single project that Fraser mentioned at an actual level, and you're done. Yeah. So it is a tool that's been built to be complicated enough to deal with PAS 2080, but hopefully if you just simply want to run an annual carbon footprint for a small organization, just click actual single project, input your numbers, and you're done. Right, so that's the kind of, I'm just conscious of time, we've only got 5 minutes, but the rest of the stuff might be a little bit, should we just do the challenges actually, Fraser? We'll talk about them quickly. I don't think we'll get a chance to do the actual time-wise, the full session. Can we go back and have by the way, when you do get to the FAME tool, we're available for training if you should need it, but also there are video resources. So we made a whole, we had to make a YouTube channel because we're not really that good at marketing as an organization. So we made ourselves a YouTube channel, and then Charlotte, who did a lot of the tool development, recorded like user videos. So you can, they're there to walk you through the process. There are obviously, if you prefer paper documentation, there's also user guides that kind of come with it as well. I would talk about PAS 2080. We've talked about a little bit, highlighting that this idea where PAS 2080 forces you to kind of go for one of 4 roles. And in terms of constructors, it's the least worst fit. Our experience of BSI audit recently is that even then that caused a little bit of a computer says no type reaction. So we're still trying to work through a little bit with the certification bodies quite how archaeology should be and what the clauses of PAS 2080 which should apply. So we've talked about that. I'm really conscious that it might be, we had this phrase when I worked for BT, which is abroad, which is always like drinking from the fire hose, which was like way too much information in too short a time. And I've got a feeling we might be doing that. But just to kind of let you know that while the tool helps you with Power 2080, it has, there's a lot of kind of capability within it, but it does take a little bit of kind of getting used to it. So you can actually simulate, well, what's the impact of doing this? So for, I think in the A66 project, originally we would probably expect people to go to and from site every day. But on that project, one of the carbon reduction proposals was that actually we'll kind of go there, travel there once a week, stay over locally, and then we'll head back. So we're actually able to simulate what the carbon saving is quite quickly within the same tool of that activity. So takes a little bit of finesse, but it is possible. Yeah, I think. How many of you here have actually read Power 2080? Got one hand thought of, right? So this idea that you have to forecast and then monitor your carbon footprint against it is embedded in Power 2080. But it gets to be quite a significant challenge if you've got a project that's constantly changing scope. So, and I think we actually had it recently where, something wasn't really expected was found, and then suddenly the scope of the project changes. So the reality is we need to manage that in the forecast as well, because the forecast isn't like something that we do once and then walk away, because ultimately comparing the forecast that was correct at the start of the project, but the scope has completely changed in terms of the scope of works throughout that project, you could then end up with an actual way higher than your forecast because you've just done a lot more work than you were planning. So this is kind of one of the challenges. The tool itself is enabled to do that, but it's just something that you've got to be quite cognizant when you're doing. Similarly, how do we manage the fact that actually the post-excavation phase can last way longer, if you like, than the carbon accounting for any particular development? The road might have been built 5-10 years before you finished actually doing the final reports on the post-excavation phase. How do we deal with that? Because ultimately, the carbon account may well have closed for that particular scheme. And then, we've talked about this last one, which is like, how do we kind of obligate, with Power 2080 obligates you to meet the carbon reduction targets. So if we're obligated at the beginning of a project to meet those targets, we have to have some way of kind of calculating, well, what do we think it would be if we hadn't made any proactive measures? And then how impactful are those proactive measures going to be? And is that a sufficient enough reduction to meet these reduction targets that come into us? Again, totally possible to do within the tool as well. So, and we are actively doing that. We're doing with both Oxford and Texas. Don't think we've got time to do the final game. There is another one, but and we're happy, as say, people can take this away after the event and trial it if they also. So, I guess in summary from that one, you'll get more access to it hopefully in the future, but the FAME calculator obviously provides you with a standardized sector-specific tool, which really provides you with this kind of credible level of reporting. We're not cutting off environmental impact because it's inconvenient or too difficult to kind of like think about doing. We've kind of built it so that you input your data, it will sort out those. For SMEs, as I say, you can use it. This is one of the questions which I haven't seen Dan here than Dan Miles today. But was like, how do we make this work for the SMEs who may not be needing it at that Power 2080 level? Well, the answer to that is, if you want to do your organizational carbon footprint quickly, then essentially do it through that one project method. And that would be enough to be able to get you kind of through things like PPNO 61, so the public sector carbon reduction requirement. Then obviously larger organizations, as we've discussed, the calculator is kind of like a cornerstone for Power 2080. But it's also, and that partly because FAS 2080 requires you to have a methodology that you subscribe to, but there wasn't really one available or suitable for the sector, which is another reason why we developed both the tools and the methodology. And from there, you need a bigger wrap around the tool, to be frank, to be compliant with FAS 2080, but it is like a significant chunk, and the way in which you can demonstrate compliance.